Hello everyone, and welcome to the RV Inspection and Care channel. I'm Dwayne and I'm a certified level 2 RV inspector. And today we're going to be talking about the smartphone apps that I use to get RV friendly GPS directions without having to go out and buy that expensive GPS unit, you know, the one that costs a few $100s. And last week I made a video about how I use RV Trip Wizard online to lay out the trips that I take, especially the trips that take a while. You know, they're long trips, or I'm going into areas where I'm really kind of unfamiliar with things. I use RV Trip Wizard to lay out those trips. And if you haven't seen that video, then it would be a good idea to go ahead and watch that first and then come back to this video, because this video will make an awful lot more sense if you do that. Because this week I cover the apps that I use on the road to be as familiar with the route that I'm traveling on as possible, and what's around that area and what's around the area of the campground that I'm going to be staying in. Now, using RV Trip Wizard along with the apps that I'm going to talk about today has saved me a lot of money, and that's because two of the apps are absolutely free to use the way that I use them, and the third app is only $10, so that's pretty cheap. So let me go ahead and show you how I use these apps now. And the first app is one called RV Life. And RV Life is really the company that also makes RV Trip Wizard. So you're going to see now how that using both of those tools together helps make your trips so much easier and more safe. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are in the RV Life app, and it usually opens up here in the campground map view, and it's a good view to start with. You can actually make short one-stop trips right here in the app if you want to do that. You can zoom in to the icons like the rest areas here and get information, or the gas stations in the area, or the campgrounds, and of course there's lots of information about them that you can get from the app right here. You can zoom out and get a picture of the wider view of the area. You can zoom in, and of course here's a feature that I really like to use in this app is I'll go satellite view. I'll go to the campground that I'm heading for, and we'll use this one this particular time. We'll zoom right in and get in a very close view, and what we're trying to do is see about the roads that go in and out of this campground. What do they look like? Because I've found a lot of times that some of the roads getting in and out of campgrounds can be a little difficult to manage, especially if you have a big rig. So this gives you a good idea about what that campground looks like for getting in and out of it. You could do that with gas stations as well, by the way. Now here's a feature that I really use the most often with this app, and that is I can import my RV Trip Wizard trips. The trips I've already made up online in RV Trip Wizard, I can import them here just like the one that you're seeing. Let's go to one of the stops along this trip, and once it brings it up, let's press the View RV Friendly Directions, and it will take us to that section of the trip, that stop. And then it gives us not only the map that I made up online, but maybe an alternative, another idea. I like that. That's good. Once it's in here in the app, I can zoom in. I can make sure that yes, this is the trip that I set up, or the stop that I set up in RV Trip Wizard, and then I can go ahead and start using it if I want in the app, and it'll give turn-by-turn audible directions using the trip that I set up in RV Trip Wizard. And to me, that is just so cool. I mean, to be able to take that trip, put it in here, and then give me directions based on what I've created there is really neat. Now let's go to the next section, Search and Explore. This is when you get to the campground. Well, you may want to look around and see what's around in the area. This will give you a lot of information about that. It'll tell you about the weather forecast, things to do in the area, things in the campground. Then also, you can even get an offline map to download for the area that you're in. Now, that costs a little bit more to do that. You need a subscription to the app to do it, but still, you do have that ability if you like to use that. Then it'll tell you about nearby attractions. So while you're on the road, it'll tell you about rest stops and gas stations and so on. Really a lot of information in this particular section. And of course, there's another little feature with RV related articles, so that if you want to learn more about RVing, you're kind of new to it, well, that's something you might enjoy as well. But once again, the main thing that I use this app for is for importing my RV Trip Wizard trips and then using them as a turn-by-turn audible direction as I'm going down the road. You know, just like you do in Google Maps, it tells you when to turn and all of that. Well, you can get that in this app from the trips and the stops that you created on that trip in RV Trip Wizard. Very, very cool. All right, let's move on now to our next app. So here is the second app that I like to use other than the RV Life app. And it's an app called Truck Map, and it's absolutely free. It's mainly used by truckers to make sure that the routes they're traveling on are friendly for big rigs, you know, trucking rigs and things like that. So I like to use it just to make sure that all of the trips or the routes that I have been given by RV Trip Wizard agrees with this app, and therefore I can make sure that if a big truck can be on this route, well, of course my rig can be on it too. So it's a great app for that. Now let's take an example here. Let's say that we're going to go from where I am to Gettysburg Farm Campground in Pennsylvania. So we bring that up, we search for it, here it is, and now I'm going to select it. So the first thing it'll do is it'll show me a picture of the campground. Well, that's great. I could zoom in and use the satellite view if I wanted to, but once again, that's something that I usually do in the RV Life app. So I don't really need that feature here. But the thing I do need is, notice it will allow me to look at all the turns that's on this route or this trip. So I go ahead and I select the turns, and it gives them all to me in a list, turn by turn, how to go on this particular route. And that's great because now I can compare that to the trip that was set up in RV Trip Wizard. If the two of them agree, well, I've got confirmation then that the trip I set up in RV Trip Wizard really is RV friendly. I shouldn't be hitting any major problems or snags along the way with an RV rig. I can zoom in, I can follow the route as you go, and I can make sure again on the map that this is exactly what I set up in RV Trip Wizard, and that it is big rig friendly, because once again, if a truck and their big rig can go down these routes, well, then my RV rig can certainly do it as well. So it's a great app for verifying the trips I've set up in RV Trip Wizard. All right, now let's get to the next app on the list. Okay, so here we are in the third app I like to use, and that is an app called AllStay. It does cost, it costs about $10 to buy, but it provides a lot of auxiliary information. Again, more information that you can get your hands on, the better. And in this particular program, it does a lot. For instance, on rest stops, it'll tell me not only where a rest stop is, it'll tell me how many truck parking spaces are there, you know, the size of the rest stop. So I know what I'm kind of getting into when I get off there, and that's good to know. Here's another thing that I often use the program for, is for gas stations. So before I get to a gas station, let's say I want to pull off the road there because there aren't any rest stops, well, it'll tell me how many truck parking spaces are there. It'll also tell me how many gas pumps are there for trucks. Here on bridges, it'll tell me not only where the bridge is, but you know, the height clearance, everything I need to know. So much information in the AllStay's app. I also use it for finding out where LP gas is locally. You can use it for dump stations in the area. Just, once again, more information. And the more information you have about the areas you're going into that you're not really familiar with, all the better. And so it's a great app for that. Well, I hope you can see how valuable these smartphone apps really are. For me, it saved me from having to go out and buy that really expensive RV GPS unit, and that's been great. I've been able to use this system on a 23-stop trip from coast to coast across this country, and let me tell you, that's really putting it to the test, and it has worked the whole way. So it's been great for me. If you find any tips in these videos that will help you in laying out your trips and taking them, well, then that's exactly what I was hoping for. Well, that's it for now. Have safe and happy travels, my friends. Until next time.